Hello. Welcome to Pebblebrook Village. I'm Peony, and this is the month ahead Trashfire Tarot for the week of May 25th. The month of May has been a deep dive into our emotional depths to explore the very Plutonian themes of the Five of Cups. We have navigated to the distant shore, the second decan of Taurus, the Six of Pentacles, where the full moon was, and where we paused the journey going into June. We started the full moon in Scorpio and end the month on a full moon in Sagittarius. This month also marked our first monthly guided meditation that is meant to go along with the month ahead forecasts. These are being provided by the very gifted Patricia Sybeck, who is one of the contributors here at Pebblebrook Village. We also have the brilliant Audrey Leray, who is one of the brains behind Retrograde Radio. The meditations post on the first of the month. We'll have a new one for June coming up here soon. And Retrograde Radio is weekly on Wednesdays. Both can be found with Trashfire Tarot as a part of Pebblebrook Village. This is the first time in 84 years that we are living through a Sagittarius moon that is in opposition to Uranus in Gemini. This is occurring on the first house, seventh house axis in the United States Sibley chart, with Uranus in the seventh house of foreign affairs and relationships with other countries. So, will this be a tense moment of the US versus the world? Well, luckily for you, if you're interested, you can find out this on this Wednesday's episode of Retrograde Radio, your deep cuts from the stars, with me and Audrey. All right, so let's see where our journey ends and what energies await us as we prepare to embark on the next step in this perpetual journey with June 1st. All right, for our guiding star this week, we have the Magician. Our good friend Mercury, Hermes, um, the ruler of Gemini, and thus the planet ruling over Uranus currently, hosting it, if you will. So as we embark on the final leg of May's journey, we are being reminded that we contain multitudes. We are not binary or chained by tradition. Hermes also contained multitudes, a psychopomp and messenger um, of the underworld just as much as a, messenger of the gods. He, uh, they, um, kind of walk with Persephone, down to the underworld on the autumn equinox and back to Demeter series with the spring equinox. So they're a guide, a translator, um, and so keep that in mind as we go through this week. I think that's important. Um, that especially with this energy in Gemini right now, being in Gemini season, we have the Kazemi, we have Mercury is still there. Um, so there's a lot of energy in that mercurial space. Um, we are genuinely capable of so much inherently, right? Society, capitalism has reduced us down to worker bees who are too exhausted to truly experience life. But in us, we all contain a spark. And what that spark contains differs from person to person, which is one of the most wonderful things to experience. and we cannot utilize that spark in isolation. Well, not to say you can create and isolate. You can. There are countless accounts of that. But so objectively you can. However, think of what you could do in a community with support and all these multitudes of sparks firing off in this like kaleidoscopic spectacle, right? Um, we contain these multitudes, and when we come together and share our perspective on these multitudes, we can do truly magical things. Um, and the magician also carries this shadow of manipulation, like a stage magician or even a comedian doing crowd work. The magician can be a master of illusion through observation. They can present you with one fact while enacting the opposite. They are a little bit of everything all the time, so much so that they can lose themselves and be nothing but a projection of their own confusion. And I've talked about this before, but the major arcana, when they appear, are like this exclamated point or theme. So I don't see this as being a specific person, but I do see it pertaining to the speed at which misinformation is coming out at the same time real news of, like shortages, and increased risk of like super El Nino, are being suppressed or downplayed. One of the like most obvious places, or glaring places, obvious isn't the right word, one of the most glaring places where this kind of manipulation is happening, this magic trick, is the stock market. It presents a story that economically, in terms of the United States, that everything is great here. The Dow is above 50,000, right? Um, and it's not the truth, though. If you look at the impact this illegal war in Iran is having, and the kind of domino effect of this destruction of facilities, oil facilities, and stopping of transport. And it is very much a look over here, don't look over there, pulling a rabbit out of the hat type of trick. Because sure, they can paint this illusion that everything is fine. And like Mercury, like the magician, us as people need to be able to be more discerning of what we are being told. And on a collective level, this week might feel like a spell is as like gaslighting, right? Um, essentially. I don't know, there's a 3-day weekend going into when this posts on the 25th. Um, there's that Pluto square with Mars that's happening. Um, so I feel like stuff will be ramping up again. Um, we'll see on Monday. I don't do this to be predictive necessarily, but I just get a vibe with the magician, um, being the guiding star for this week is, to remember to be discerning. There are tricksters and malicious tricksters working to keep information away from us, to keep us away from us. All right. So the why. Um, King of Wands. And this is interesting because we had the King of Wands for the guiding star for last week. So it was kind of the overall kind of like what the energy, what the vibe was for that week. So a little more ambiguous. Kind of takes a different shape, when it's the energy of the week versus like why is this energy here? So the King of Wands is repeating itself from last week. And it's trying to explain why the magician. Um, there can be a genuine and healing power found in the confidence of the King of Wands. And this is one of the things I love about tarot and being a diviner. We have the magician as the guiding star. So to me, the king popping back up in the sort of why feels like a warning to watch out for that energy I talked about last week with reckless and self-serving leaders. These are your dogmatic figures who represent systems so rigid that the slightest challenge will expose how fragile they are. This is a person or people who bully to get where they are. They use their followers as scapegoats. They blame a problem on a group of people to sow hate and division and then present themselves as the only solution to that problem. And that's the illusion, right? One, it's not the solution because the problem is fabricated. Not to say there are problems, but the problems that those in control, the leaders and their magicians, they're kind of Rasputin figures, if you will. Um, they're not trying to fix the actual problems because they need those problems to persist because then they can keep presenting themselves as a solution to the problem and then in perpetuity keep pointing fingers back and forth at different sides of this same problem of a government that doesn't serve the people. It's like, oh, well, they said this horrible thing. Oh, well, they didn't do anything. Oh, well, and it's just this Spider-Man meme of pointing back and forth, and then that trickles down to the people who then do the same thing. So the problem is fabricated. Two, there are always multiple angles to look at something. I can't help but feel this also represents patriarchy with the magician. They're getting more and more desperate to pull the wool over our heads through their spells of misinformation, through, casting illusory enemies, right? Let's bomb a country nearly to hell and back and point fingers at them for being the problem. And it's a really tough story to keep selling, um, to the point that you see the control that they want to have over First Amendment rights and what people can say, online. So the King of Wands returning is this sort of bridge between these 2 weeks. And last week it was the dominant energy. This week it's kind of an explainer as to why the magician has revealed themselves. And there's this suggestion of that the force of leadership, charisma, ambition, command, or that ideological fire from last week is now generating action. The King of Wands has become the engine behind this manifestation of the magician. Kind of a difference of here is the vision versus here's how we make the vision real. And in a healthy expression, this is bold leadership becoming effective and organizing, movement, community, or collective desire. Um, and at its worst, kind of its shadow side, this is charisma acquiring machinery. The King of Wands can inspire, but it can also dominate. The magician can organize, it also manipulates. And together they build this signal that powers the propaganda engine. And then it's a pairing that has a very sharp, high voltage to it. Something is being made something is being made because a strong will wants it made, and the collective needs to pay attention not only to what is being said but what is being done. Does it align? Maybe you fell for the magician's spell because they spoke in a way that was relatable to you, and they sold you promises of fixing these problems. And we struggle with owning mistakes. All of us do. The most self-aware, we all do. And I think there is this collective reticence to really saying I was wrong. And that's not singular on one binary political alignment. I'm talking about the whole sphere, right? And the illusion worked. Okay. Bad people do that. They manipulate to get what they want. You're not inherently a bad person for falling for that. You're not stupid. And I need people, if they genuinely feel, that what is going on is not right, that it doesn't align with the promise I was sold, to be discerning and hold leaders accountable. Okay. So, how do we move through this week? The Hermit. So we've got a major arcana sandwich. Not only is it a major arcana sandwich, but it's a Mercury sandwich, in that the magician is Mercury. It's very mercurial coded. And then you have the Hermit, which is representative of Virgo, right? So it's one of the multitudes that the magician contains. If you look at the progress of signs, Aries initiates, Taurus maintains, Gemini innovates, and then by the time we get to Virgo, this is where we refine. After we nurture it in Cancer, and you put it out into the world with Leo. And there's obviously a lot more to those signs than just that, but in this quick kind of um look at the wheel of and especially if Gemini is innovation, what is that other side of Mercury? What is the other side of Hermes? And there's the refinement um, that Virgo is so good at. Um, and a lot of the psychopomp aspects of Mercury really, I think, hit with Virgo as well. Not that they certainly resonate to degrees with Gemini as well, but I I I think like the very stereotypical mercurial things that we always hear about, that like fast pacedness, the flitting from here and here to here, the messenger thing is more Gemini than that aspect is Virgo. And there's this whole other aspect to what Virgo inhabits in a chart. So we've got this Virgo energy. This card embodies the sacred curiosity of the world. Um, and even this card sometimes it can be reduced to someone, hiding away, or a neurotic perfectionist. Um, because they disrupt the sterile order of a world built on unnatural, Christo-fascist, imperialistic, patriarchal ideals. They see the cracks and want to fix. This comes from being the keepers of the sacred flame, protectors and healers of the earth and the divine. They cannot abide the unnatural, and that does not vibe with people who would rather keep their heads in the sand and ignore the reality and depth of our issues. So how do we navigate this? To quote, paraphrase, because I don't remember the exact quote, Javier Bardem recently, how do we navigate this big ball toxic masculinity? Right? We call it out. And the hermit is that discernment. The hermit is retreat, not to run away, not in cowardice, but it is this retreat to stop and think a second and be like, wait, okay, these are some really pretty illusions. Like, I'm liking what I'm hearing. Do the actions line up to what they're telling us, though? Um, right? And so we call it out. And I also see this as kind of being the antithesis to, the magician and the King of Wands, together, at least, in a very matriarchy kind of way. And matriarchy is a very complex topic because it's not white women running capitalism. It's not Hillary Clinton. That is still patriarchy. A woman helming a patriarchal system, committing several genocides in real time, while not being able to commit that same fervor to healthcare for all, is a fucking problem. It is not a mirror of what is. It's not women running around oppressing men. And when matriarchy comes up, there is this very patriarchal way of looking at what that actually is. And these men, these King of Wands and their magicians, are scared. And they can't fathom a world built on care and nurture and inclusive and this um drive around the children of the communities and protecting the children and protecting the elderly and food on every table and roofs over everyone's head, even when we disagree. 'Cause that is matriarchy. It's very Cancer in a lot of ways. And Jupiter is there right now, and that's great. There's that expansion with that idea of the motherland and what that looks like. But it's not just women leading doing the same thing that we're doing now. It is people coming together of all identities and governing through care of the people, not governing through lobbyists, not governing through foreign interests, not governing through manipulation and fear. So this retreat and discernment is needed. Um, I feel like, crap is gonna amp up again. So I don't know by the time this gets posted, you know, um, and it's just been horror after horror. And in spite of that, we need to still rest. We need to still take care of ourselves so we can take care of those around us, so we can take care of those that don't have the privilege and ability to do so, especially as things might get worse. The hermit is someone who understands that knowing is sacred. Learning, curiosity, they're sacred. They carry the lantern to shine a light on what others tend to avoid. They call it out, not out of criticism, but out of care of refinement. If a Democratic candidate is not advocating for trans rights, if a Democratic candidate is taking money from AIPAC, if a Democratic candidate is campaigning against taxing billionaires, we got to call them out. Like I know we don't want. We're so team oriented, and we don't want to hold quote unquote our team accountable. But all the blue team is offering as a solution is thoughts and prayers. All they are offering is, well, we're not the other guys. And we got to do better than that. That's not going to cut it. And so the hermit does not mean disengagement in the sense of apathy. It means stepping back far enough to see clearly. We have to be discerning. We have to be mindful of the illusions and the mistrust and the manipulation and just putting us, the people, at each other's throats while the billionaires laugh all the way to the bank. So collectively, this suggests the way through May 25th is not emotional. Um, it's not allegiance. It is careful observation, research, reflection, listening to elders, historians, spiritual teachers, listening to our Black and Brown communities, our immigrant neighbors and friends, our indigenous communities. If you want to be a better white person, you got to stop being so white focused. We need to retreat into ourselves a little bit. And I've said discerning a million times. We need to be discerning. All right. Let's look at what the clarifier is for this week. Sometimes it's quick. Two of Swords, first decan of Libra, indecision, at an impasse. This week is an impasse. Yeah, I could see, you know, things happening on even smaller scale that could force people out of this, being in their own way, not being able to make decisions around things, and that's where the Hermit comes in, right? It is weigh the weigh the choices. Um, we can't spend so much time on trying to perfect it or trying to make the best option. You go with what information you have at hand. We are going to be discerning in doing that. Going to be a little slow and steady when we can. It is a very fast-paced environment right now. A lot of fast-paced lightning bolt and energy. But in spite of that, still try to find that retreat and those moments of pause so that we aren't just consuming, we are actually, um, we're actually thinking for ourselves and not just responding to a song lyric or reacting to a movie scene. All those things are fantastic. I love both. And there's that's not to shame people for doing that. And sometimes we need to shut our brains off and we do it that way. And that's fine. We still need, myself included, to be better at just being bored. And it's something I've talked about before. Boredom is really an illusion of sorts. From capitalism, and I think, we're not supposed to stop being productive. We're not supposed to stop doing, and that means consuming food, consuming media, consuming podcasts, consuming music, consuming books, consuming other people's creations, consuming other people's words, ideas, and that is a important and I think pivotal part of community. It's a beautiful part of highlighting all of our uniqueness. And we need to still spend time with just ourselves in quiet and let our thoughts be our thoughts, not motivated by something being shown to us, not motivated by something we're hearing being said. We need to sit outside or, and just watch nature be nature. Sit in silence and see where your thoughts go when they're unprovoked by outside sources, right? Spend time with yourself. Don't just be chained to the engines of consumption that the King of Wands and their magicians want us um, overwhelmed by. All right. That'll do it for this week on Trashfire Tarot. Don't forget to check out Retrograde Radio on Wednesdays. I'm Peony, and until next time, I love you all, and I will see you in the stars.